Nigerians want a change, and they have said so through the ballot box.
The decision of the federal military government to cancel the election of June 12 is invidious, unpatriotic.
Those were the emotions conveyed after the June 12, 1993 presidential elections were annulled by the then head of state, Ibrahim Babangida. And these were his reasons.
It is true that the presidential election was generally seen to be free, fair, and peaceful. However, there was in fact a huge array of electoral practices virtually in all the states of the Federation before the actual voting began.
Riots, protests, civil disobedience, and everything possible were done to convince the military junta, but all to no avail. 20 years after the annulment, there is still huge support for the elections most people see as perhaps the freest and fairest in Nigeria's history. But that mandate never held sway. Painful but real, the sacrifice made of the 1993 polls may not be unconnected with the survival of Nigeria's budding democracy. Since the return to democracy in 1999, there's been a big question on the integrity of elections in the country. And now, 2015 is another big election year. Nigerians will, of course, not accept anything short of a free and fair polls. Since his death in 1998, MKO Abiola has been seen by some people as a representation of the hopes and certainty of the agony and protest of those who suffer injustice. As June 12 anniversary clocks 21 years, one can only hope that the people's voice will continually be heard as against the will of the few. Everyone indeed has a role to play in the sustenance of Nigeria's democracy and civil rights. But for now, it is still unclear what MKO Abiola stands for nationally. Seun Okinbaloye, Channels Television News. Thank you for staying with us here on Politics Today. Well, that particular issue, June 12, we all know it. It's the anniversary clocked 21 years. It's one of the issues we'll be discussing on the program tonight. But just not yet. That will be later. The issue of the politicians moving from one party to the other, defections, is what gets our attention. And you can be part of the discussion on the program by following us on these tweet handles and send your comments to us and also on our email. Well, I have my guests. Let me introduce them now. Standing by in our Abuja studio is a former federal lawmaker at the House of Reps from Edo State. He's Honorable West Idahosa. Thank you for joining us on the program. And also, I have here with me in this Lagos studio, Mr. Wale Ogwande, a legal practitioner and Election Awareness Initiative. Thank you for joining us in the program.
Thank you so much.
Let me start with Honorable West Idahosa. Just before we went on that break, you heard what Professor Jega said about defections, political defections, and the fact that those who defect will have to vacate their seats and allow for fresh conduct of elections. What is your take on the stand of the INEC chairman?
Well, I read it and I listened very clearly to him, but I'm not too sure what variant of democracy he's talking about, because defection cannot automatically warrant forfeiture of public offices. This is not the only country where democracy is practiced. Indeed, we did not even introduce democracy. Most importantly, public office holders are statutory creatures. They represent giving constituencies. And what is very significant is that the constituents must be given a fair hearing and a representation in the various institutions where those representations are required. The political parties are merely vehicles for reaching there. Indeed, there are many countries that do not have political parties at all, where you can contest election as independent candidates. So that's why many are agitating for the creation of independent candidacy in this country. So it is not democratically correct that because you defect from one party to another, you ought to forfeit your seat or vacate that office to occasion a by-election. Strongly speaking, you have to look at more established democracies and to reach this conclusion that I have just made. Do not forget that we are in an evolutionary period in our democracy. Many countries of the world, for more than 200 years, party formation remained an emerging process from one stage to another. And it is likely to be so in Nigeria up to the point where the people themselves identify one or two parties as the authentic vehicles for choosing candidates in this country. And until we get there, it will be difficult to decree into existence the attempt to confine an elected public office holder to his particular party, even when he differs in terms of ethical obligation to himself based on his views for which he sought election, or even when the party itself is misdirecting itself and is unable to use the internal machinery of the party to correct the situation, or even when he thinks that the party has lost a public face and is no longer a safe constituency. These are usually the three reasons why people defect around the world, and our country is not an exception. As we progress in this program, I will make further comments.
But maybe we should take a look at what the Constitution actually says about defection for perhaps lawmakers and people in the executives. I'm wondering, you were in the Federal House of Reps and you understand what this means. Does it actually mean differently thing entirely for executives and the lawmakers?
Well, if you look at the provisions of the Constitution on that question, it is completely silent on what happens to a defecting executive office holder, while it seeks to regulate what happens to an elected lawmaker. I mean, for example, it says that an elected lawmaker can only defect upon two conditionalities. One, if there has been a merger of the political party to which he belonged and upon which platform he contested an election, or two, if there had been a faction in the political party to which he belonged and one of such factions joining another party. Now, nothing has been said about the executive office holders, and that was why in the past many governors and other executive office holders have done so without any difficulties and are still doing so. So to me, that is a constitutional discrepancy. It's a double speak by the Constitution, because if you really want to apply that doctrine, an office holder is an office holder. But as I have argued before, it is completely unnecessary. It is a constitutional overloading and a democratic unnecessity. I believe very strongly that what is significant is that the statutory offices that you represent when you are elected into public office should give you that cover and coverage to be able to hold the views on behalf of the constituency that you have been elected. It does not ipso facto mean that once you switch parties, which is quite a common feature of democracy, and it's been so since 1701, it is still so till tomorrow in many parts of the world. So there is nothing sacrosanct about party switching. It is a culture that can only evolve into maturity. You can only agitate for a reduced switching culture, and that cannot happen unless our attitude democratically changes. So I think that that clause or that section of the Constitution is unnecessary. And indeed, if you ask me, during the process of the review going on, I will say and so strongly submit that it should be expunged.